Welcome to this module. This module is about the OpenLCA software. In this module, I'll quickly give a demo of how to use OpenLCA software to do your own process LCA using the information that is available in this software already. So, before we begin, if you are a student with computer, I would advise you to download the OpenLCA software. If you Google, you will be able to find the LCA software or the OpenLCA software website. When you go on the website, there are a lot of versions available. Download the version that is compatible with your computer, whether you are using Windows or a Mac version. Once you have downloaded, you should be able to see this welcome screen. Right now on my left panel, you can see some of the databases that I have already set up, but when you download, you would not see all of these information. So, I will give you 30 seconds to just download the software. If you are a student who does not have a computer, you can use your notebook to jot down the steps and can learn about the software at your own convenience. If you do not want to learn about the software, you can skip to the next module. So, once you have downloaded the software, your software is not ready for use. So, you would need to set up your software for the use to do LCA. So, there are two things that we need to do. So, if you remember, when we are doing our LCA, we set up the data for life cycle inventory using our unit processes. So, that is the first thing that we need to set up for the OpenLCA software, which is the database that contains information about all the unit processes, flows data. So, remember, in those flow diagrams, we have the inputs and the outputs, products, we also have the waste. So, all of this information is available free of cost worldwide in these databases. Of course, some of these databases are very region specific. So, if you are setting up your LCA for a specific region, you need to be cautious of that, or you can also think about a world average. In this software, you can either use directly the database that is available, but you can also build or input your own data, and I will demonstrate the use of the already available database, but also how to enter your own data. The next thing is the impact assessment method. So, once you have the life cycle inventory, remember the third step of LCA is when we convert it into the impacts. For that, we use different LCIA methods. So, each of the LCIA methods comes with its own characterization factor for each of the impact categories that is included in its system or in its characterization. So, that data is also available from the database free of cost. So, for preparing your OpenLCA, we first do the setup of database, where you need to choose the database, and you can go to this website and we can download data set from free databases. So, let us take a look at the website. So, this is the website for the OpenLCA Nexus. You can make your own account free of cost, and you can see all the databases that are available. So, we can look at the databases, and these are the different databases that are available. OpenLCA also integrates its software with the EcoInvent, which is the standard LCA software or the LCA database that is available. There are also a lot of new databases that are available. So, there is also Federal LCA Commons that is developed from the US. We have other like Carbon Mines and Plex, Impact World. So, all of these are available. Some of these are free and some of those are not free. Of course, for our education purpose, we are going to use free databases. So, there are some of them which are free of cost. So, for example, the ones that we will be using are this is needs database. The needs database has information about the energy systems, and since we are going to look at an example that relates to the energy system and production, so we will go into that. The Joint Research Commission, the European Commission also provides an ELCD database available, and the Bioenergy DAT. We also have the USDA providing some of its databases available. So, once you have reached this page, you can download, and when you say download, what you will be able to do is that you will be able to look into the specific file. So, if you are going to download, we can go to the downloads, and you can see all of these that are available. So, you will need to of course acknowledge the terms, and then when you hit download, you see the form of the file that we are going to download is ZOLCA. So, that is the file format that the database will get download. So, once you have that, let's do the first step of setting up the database. So, I am going to also use some of the previously loaded database because it takes some time for the database to come up. So, what you would do is you can just say right click and you can create a new database, and I am going to say needs 18 version 2, and you can check empty database. I would not recommend doing empty database because then you will need to make all the flows by manually, but just use the complete reference data and it will include some of the all the structure. So, let us do this. When you create this, you can see that I have this needs 18.2 and I can then look at the data structure. In the data structure, you can see we have projects, product systems, processes, flows, EPDs and results. So, processes are the one which will have information about our unit processes. This is where our life cycle inventory data gets stored. And then we also see we have indicators and parameters. That is the next step where we can also download the life cycle impact assessment parameters. So, I have already downloaded, but you can browse around the site and you will look at some of the downloads available for the impact assessment method. So, let me see. So, here we have this OpenLCA LCIA method. So, if you go there, you will see there are a lot of different LCIA methods. So, you can use one of the ZOLCA and you can also select to download. So, then we can include that. So, once we have that, we can also include the impact assessment paper. So, here when you look at the new database that we have created, we do not have anything. The processes is empty. We do have the flows, but it is just the empty elementary flows, which is the economic product, that is the output. We have the emissions to air, soil, water, and then we have the resource and the waste calculation, but all of these are actually going to be empty. So, to populate that, what we will do is we can import the data. So, now whatever ZOLCA file we have downloaded from the website, we will just import it and we can say other, and here you can see import entire database. We can say next, and then we can from exported ZOLCA file. So, then we can browse and we can find wherever we have downloaded our ZOLCA file. So, I can go to, and when you say finish, it will import that data set. So, it will take couple of seconds to import. So, once we have imported our database and also the impact assessment method, you can go into these processes and you can see all the unit information or the unit process information that is available. So, for example, I can look into the metals and you can see the metal extraction processes for aluminum, copper and all of the different products that we can use as an input in our life cycle is there. Similarly, we can see for energy, we have hydrogen that is used as a fuel. So, you can see hydrogen compressed gas that is available for fueling. If you want to look into the details of it, we can go into, let us go into look into the bioenergy, or maybe let us look into a material. We can look into glass that is used for construction. We can look at the flat glass. So, when you open, you will get information about that process. So, what this is telling me is that the description about the life cycle inventory, it is telling what year this inventory was published, what was the location the data was collected. You can go into the inputs and outputs. So, that will give you all the inputs that was given. So, you see that there is categorization of where this resource was extracted from and where it is actually on what all inputs have gone into it. You can also see all the emissions and you can see where those emissions are going. Then you can look into the administrative information that will give you an idea of who is the person to contact if you want to validate some of the inventory. So, you can also see a allocation tab and see there is no allocation, which means that this process was for a unit process that only made one product in the system. Similarly, we have, and you can see there is no impact analysis, but it is giving you the process impact analysis for whatever functional unit. So, here you can see the value output that you are going to see. So, that gives you all the life cycle inventory. Similarly, you can go and look into the impact indicator. So, if you go to the impact assessment methods, I have imported the OpenLCA, LCIA methods, and you can see there are all these different methods that we talked about in the life cycle impact assessment. Based on which method you will choose, you will see what are the impact categories. So, we can open and we can see what are the different impact categories that is offered by these impact assessment method. Each of these impact assessments, so based on your goal of the LCA, you can select which impact assessment method you are going to use for your analysis, and we will see when we set up the LCA study. So, that is the default setup once you have imported a database both for the unit processes information, the processes, and for the impact assessment method. That is how your database will look like for your LCA analysis. Now, you will see that your product systems, results and all of those are empty, because what we have done is we have only imported our raw data, we have not set up an LCA study. So, next what we will do, we will see how to set up an LCA study. So, we already prepared. So, these two steps of importing data set and also your impact assessment method finishes your preparation of OpenLCA software for conducting LCA. So, now we are going to do an LCA using this approach. So, now let us see how we can create the analysis for an LCA system in the software. So, here we will take an example of bottle production LCA. Our goal is to study the impact of making a glass bottle. In the steps for building LCA, we can create new flows and create new processes, and in the process then we can enter the inputs and outputs. Here you can see that I have a bottle production process. We have electricity and glass as the input and bottle as the output. So, if you go to the processes in the software, you will not see a bottle production processes. So, what we can do is that under processes, we can create a new process based on our information. So, let us do that. We will create a new process. We will name it as bottle production, and you can see that there is lot of reference, quantitative reference available. Since we do not have a bottle as a unit in the quantitative references available, what we will do is we will create a new flow for the process as quantitative reference. You can see that the software then gives you an option of using mass or any number of units. So, since that we will be using the total number of bottles, so we will say number of items, which means that this is a name for the number of items. So, this we can name as glass bottles being produced in the system. So, when we say finish, we will see that in our processes, under our processes, we have a new process that has been developed, which is the bottle production system. So, when we click to the bottle production system, we will see that we just created, we can write our description, a unit process depicting glass bottle manufacturing. And then we can set up the inventory. So, here we can go to the inputs and outputs. You can see that the inputs and outputs both are empty. So, we can add here as one flow. We can say we are adding electricity. So, if you can, we can add electricity from the production mix. Let us say we want to use the low voltage production, and we just say OK. So, then we have added, we can add the amount. So, this will be based on the information that you have for the total input for glass production inventory. So, it can be that you are visiting a glass production facility and you collect data on how many bottles they are making and how much electricity they are consuming for that. So, here we can enter, let us say they are consuming 50 megajoule, and these are all made up number for the demo purpose. And let us also add the other feedstock, which is the glass. So, we can see that there is a glass input as well, while even though it is saying for construction, we can take that flat glass and we can convert it into bottle. So, we will just use the uncoated flat glass that is produced at the plant, and we then say OK, and we can say, let us say we are going to use 10 kgs and the number of bottles. So, let us say the facility is making 5 units of bottle, and for 5 units of bottle it is taking 50 megajoules and of electricity and a flat glass input. So, this is very simple setting up input and output. We do not have any outputs in terms of waste and emissions, but if you are able to collect information on the emissions from the facility, we can also, let us say, add some of the emissions here. Let us say waste management, and we can see the not the waste management, we can just add some of the outputs as emissions. Elementary flows, emissions to air, let us say it's in a low population density, something outside. So, we can just do, let us say, or maybe unspecified. We can just use other emissions to air, and we can just say that this is about 2 kgs of emissions. So, now we have set up our input and output inventory. One thing you will see is that there are some costs and revenue. If you want to do an economic analysis, you can also do that. But here what we are going to do, see, important is the addition of provider. So, provider is the information that we need in case we want to connect the upstream production processes. So, here if we look at the drop down, we do not have many of the providers available for electricity low voltage, but let us look at other providers. So, if I save the information, for glass we have the provider available. So, we will just add one of the provider. Let us say all these scenarios are based on the modeling of these production processes on the energy consumption. This is the specific characteristic of the database. So, we can look at the, let us say, realistic, optimistic. So, we have now added the upstream process that will be connected to the process. If we want to see, we do not have, let us maybe add a different energy provider. Let us say electricity production mix. Electricity production mix has the provider. So, we will use this option, and we can use the realistic optimistic process. Let us say 50 megajoule, and we will delete this one. So, now we have our system set up. With this one, now we can create a, if you go to the bottle production and you right click, you will see that you can also go to the general information. One thing you will see is an option to do a create product system. So, let us say we click this create bottle production life cycle network. What we are doing now, we are setting up our life cycle network by including all the upstream processes of electricity production and glass production, and also our unit process that we have entered information into. So, now we can do that. When you say finish, you will see in the product systems you have the bottle production life cycle network created. So, when we click into that, we can look into the general information, and we can also look into the model graph. So, when you open the model graph, that shows the life cycle network that you have set up. So, you can see that we have two inputs into this system. We have the electricity production and we have the flat glass. You can go into detail and understand what is happening in electricity production by going into the processes, and this is the information that we had put. We said that our unit process information that we have for our life cycle inventory is that we are making 5 glass bottles and we have 50 megajoules of energy input, in electricity and about 10 kgs of glass input. We have not given any other output flow, so that information is not there. So now let's see how to do calculation. When you go to the general information tab, you can see that you can tell the target amount. So remember, in our goal and scope, we also set the functional unit or the target or how much impact. So let's say I want to study the impact of making 20 bottles. Even though in the life cycle inventory I put the information about 5 bottles, now I am going to scale the processes, and remember all the network algebra that we have done. Accordingly, all the upstream processes will be scaled to meet this final demand. So the target amount is the final demand. We are putting number of items and the product is glass bottles, and when you hit calculate, it will start asking you multiple things. So see, remember our allocation thing. If you have co-products, then we can specify allocation, and remember that we had done some physical allocation based on volume. You can also use economic for the partitioning or also causal, but let's not use any allocation. It is also asking me to select the impact assessment method that I want to use for my LCA. So I am going to use the CML baseline. Remember the final of when we want to go to the endpoint category, you could do in your LCIA the normalization and weighting. You can select some of the normalization and weighting that is available, but I am going to not do it. That is not recommended by ISO to generally normalize, so I am not going to do that aspect. And then let's just do a quick lazy on demand calculation. If you want to do additional things such as regionalized calculation and all of that, those options are there and you can explore on your own those options. So I will just do a simple demo of the finish calculation. When you hit finish, you will see that you get your life cycle impact in. So the first thing you can look at is the top 5 contributions to impact category result. You can see that the kg SO2 equivalent from the flat glass is really high. So the acidification potential for this life cycle network is really high because of the way the glass is being produced. Actually, the electricity production here is not the major contribution of SO2. So if you want to reduce SO2 or the acidification potential, you would need to focus on improving your glass manufacturing process. And here is the same with the other impact. We can go into the impact analysis and you can see that the highest impact is the climate change impact is about 40 kg CO2 equivalent, and then there are other impacts, which is the categories that are included in the CML baseline impact assessment category. We can also go into the process results and you will be able to remember that we talked about the contribution analysis, and you can see how much each of these processes are contributing into the process. So we can look into the bottle production is contributing. If you change, you will see how much is the electricity production is contributing into the total input and output, and you can also see what is the contribution of other flows. So that way you can analyze all the upstream inputs contribution to the impact and your unit process contribution into the impact, and you can make a decision about if you want to reduce a certain impact, which particular category of input or which particular part of your unit process needs to be changed. Then we can go into the contribution tree. Here you can see that there is what is the contribution. Bottle production actually has the highest impact, then you have the flat glass, and then in this process electricity has the lowest impact. You can look at the Sankey diagram, which shows again the impact. You can see that the flat glass has a highest impact or a much significant impact than contribute compared to the electricity production. You can also do a lot of LCIA checks, and similarly you can also get into more results. Here are all the inventory results. So that is a quick demo of how we can set up a process LCA into the OpenLCA software. I would encourage you all to use your own data or look into information for a process that you want to set up an LCA and explore different databases that can be used for conducting LCA. So go on the OpenLCA website, download the software. The steps are you set up the data steps. So you set up the database and then you set up the life cycle impact assessment methods, and then you can make your product systems by entering information about the processes that you have data into. With that, Thank you for attending this module, and I hope that you are now equipped with the basic information or the basic skill to use this OpenLCA software, and you can do an LCA for any type of product for which the processes information is available. I will see you in the next module.